So thank you everyone for having me here. It's really wonderful to come back. As Debashish mentioned, I have a long and close history with the organization from its early roots, where we just started with a handful of folks who really, we built the organization because product management was in its infancy and people didn't know, what is this role? What does it mean? How do you get training? What do you do here? And so this was just a phenomenal opportunity to be able to help grow the profession. So it's so wonderful to see how the organization has continued to grow and evolve and really thrive over the past couple of decades. So really a credit to all of you and your commitment to the role. So as Tish mentioned, I'm today wanted to share some insights around digital innovation and transformation. And through my career in product management over the past 20 plus years, one of the key challenges and opportunities that I've heard about is consistently is how do we accelerate our product innovation? And really drive that transformation as effectively as possible. And one of the best ways that I've seen to be able to do that is to really find ways to break down the barriers and blur the lines, not only between business and technology, but between all the different aspects that are part of the ecosystem. And as product managers, we sit at the center of that ecosystem. So we're in a very unique position to be able to help break down those barriers. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yep, okay. All right, so let me put it in full screen. There we go. All right, so digging in. So a little bit of context as far as why this is really important. One of the things that you've all seen, I'm sure, is this is the way we've always done it. This is, a very sequential process, whether you're agile or you're waterfall, the start to finish approach to product development still involves a lot of very sequential steps. And it inherently is very cumbersome. You have friction in the process, and the friction itself causes delays and loss of information in translation as you move from one step to the other. And so what we can do as product managers is really look at the role that we have in the center of that ecosystem to be able to reduce that friction, reduce the waste that's in the system, and also be able to help each of those components work better together. And so in today's session, I wanted to dig into three very tactical things that you can take back to your organizations tomorrow and start to apply. And then also three cultural changes that you can start to drive, because as product managers, you have a very influential role in the organization. And that's a core part of the function. Sometimes you don't have a ton of authority, but you have a lot of influence, which is a core piece of being a product manager. And there's an opportunity to use that influence to really drive cultural change in the organization as well, which will ultimately help accelerate your innovation. And then we'll wrap up with a few different common questions and challenges that I've heard certainly over the years that I thought might be helpful to share, and then wanted to leave a lot of time for us to have just an open dialogue, any questions, and really just hear from everyone here on best practices. So digging in a little bit in terms of some of the tactical changes that we can look at. Number one, goes without saying, as you all know, this is a team sport. And I think sometimes we don't say this loudly enough or often enough, but it's the reality. And when we look at success for our innovations and our products, it's not one piece of it, right? No one ever says, well, too bad the product failed, but that one little piece of UAT testing was terrific. Or, that piece of engineering code was awesome. No one says that, right? We succeed or fail as a team. And so success requires us to really keep that in mind holistically. And when we think about agile concepts, a lot of times, and depending on where your organization is in its agile maturity, people still think of agile as a largely technology-oriented construct. And it's truly only successful when you bring everyone into the fold. Business with a capital B, all of your stakeholders, not just product, but legal, compliance, marketing, sales, customer support, all need to have a seat at the table. And that's an opportunity for us, again, sitting at the center of that ecosystem to really bring everyone into the dialogue. Because it's a mind shift for everyone involved when you're asking people to take a leap of faith and do something new and try new innovation and transformation. And so I'll give you an example here. A lot of times people focus on, well, it's product and it's technology, and I'm just going to focus on these core constituents. And when you can bring other partners to the table much sooner, you'll see a dramatic difference. And we had an example where we deliberately did this. And so we brought in our legal, compliance, audit partners, whom you often think of as, I want to say almost an afterthought, right? To say, okay, we built this product, they're probably going to say no about something, so we'll take it to them at the end of the process. And instead, we brought legal, as an example, into the process from the very beginning. And we had them participate in our dialogues around prioritization, around what we were building, feedback from the customers. And it was phenomenal, the level of creativity and support and partnership that they brought was just such a difference. And they were a real asset to the launch, because then at the end, there are no surprises. No one saying, hey, but you didn't think about this, because they were with us all along the way. And so the opportunity that I would put out to all of you is, when you go back to your offices tomorrow morning, virtual offices, think about who are all those other players in your ecosystem that you could include in your dialogue, and how can you bring them into the discussion that you're having, and really make them a part of the process with you. The second piece here is, it's okay to be imperfect. And this is hard. This is really a hard one, because we all take pride in our work and we want things to be perfect. But when you can change that mindset from the beginning, you will see this sense of relief and openness in your teams. And if you can change that starting point from, I'm not expecting the first iteration or the first launch to be perfect, but it's expected to have, half a dozen different bugs and things that we want to fix, that gives people a very different mindset as they come into it. This notion of being able to really test and learn and iterate and try things differently. And so an example of this, which I think you can also take back to your teams, depending on the partners that you have in your technology teams, is we told our teams in one product launch we had, when you release the code to our engineers, regardless of how great it is, we're leaving it turned off in production. We're putting it on a switch and we're leaving it turned off. And you're like, why? But I'm working so hard. I want this thing to go in. I know you want it to go in, but we're going to let it sit there for just a little while, because then you have this sense of, okay, it doesn't have to be perfect on day one. I can keep fixing it, and I can iterate on this, and that's okay. And it really changed people's mentality around what the expectation was for the initial release. And the third thing here, walking in someone else's shoes, like really thinking about what it means to do the role of the person sitting to the left of you, sitting to the right of you, your partners. What is their function? And this is obviously a key principle in the agile space, but also looking at how can your teams, if you're a strong product analyst, also have skills in UAT or have skills in other dimensions. And the reason this is so important is because not only does it allow you to build more capacity in your team, because then when people are on, you know, when your one UAT tester is on vacation or gets sick, your product doesn't get delayed, but you have someone else that can step in and fill their shoes. But more importantly, you start to build a deeper sense of respect through people having that experience of what their colleagues are doing. You have more um, of an understanding of how complex someone else's role is, and more patience, and more of a view of why something takes so long to be done, or what it takes to do something right in their space, as opposed to saying, gosh, why does it take so long for testing to get done? Can't we just compress that timeline and get this thing out the door? But to do this, it does require an investment. And I think that's the real takeaway here is how can you help your teams be more multidisciplinary in thinking about those options? And it is an investment. You have to invest in training, job shadowing, mentoring, really investing the time for people to carve out to be able to expand their skill sets and grow and evolve. But it will pay huge dividends because your teams, you have that capacity and you have that newfound respect of your colleagues. Look at some key cultural changes, and again, as product managers, you're in a very unique leadership role to be able to drive a lot of these cultural changes across your organization. And so the first one I wanted to hit here is just kind of this, hey, wait, what are we doing again? And you'd be surprised how often you hear this, like from, I've talked to engineers and about, hey, what are you building? Why are you building it? Well, I don't know, our product managers told us to build this, so that's what we're going to do. And people don't really understand what is the value, what's the impact of the work that they are doing. And this is so important. It's simple to do if you really just sit down and do it, but it is so powerful. If you can set a clear, bold vision for what your product innovation looks like, that has so much power across your entire team. And it has to be simple. It has to be so simple that everyone knows exactly what it is. They can say it in their sleep. And you as a product manager have to say it over and over and over. And you feel, I've often felt like a broken record saying the same, tagline over and over, but you have to do it because you're interacting with so many different people and you really want them to internalize what the mission and the vision is. And one of the models that I found really effective for doing this that I really like to use is setting up your goal as we want to go from X to Y by when. And it's super simple. You only need to fill in those 3 variables, but everyone can remember, we want to generate X amount of revenue, X amount of, customers, and when do you want to get it done by? And this has a huge impact in that not only is it inspiring for everyone to have that shared vision, but it's also a good tool for prioritization and evaluating the work that you're doing. And I've often heard people when I'm not in the room and then I come in and you hear people having conversations around, well, should we do this or should we do that? Well, if we do this, it's going to help us increase our customer base by this amount and therefore help us get closer to our goal. It becomes a metric that you can use to evaluate choices that you have to make in the process. And on top of that, it also helps blur those lines because it's no longer technology versus business or us versus them. It's all of us trying to achieve this single shared goal. And that's a game changer for the team when you can align everyone to that single bold vision that everyone can clearly articulate. The second piece here is recognizing that we're all different. And this is kind of a soft skill sort of item, but encouraging people to really flex their thinking styles because we are all different. So if you're the kind of person who, when you're trying to solve a problem, you like to go in your office and close the door and, pull out an Excel spreadsheet, that's fine. Maybe, try doing it a different way. Sketch it out on a whiteboard, or pull a few people into a room, or ask your colleague how they might solve it. But really, like, challenge yourself to flex your own thinking style, and think about the fact that everyone is different, and approaches things very differently. I think we all have this default setting where you assume, if you're an introvert, other people aren't. Well, introverts probably don't think that, but if you're an extrovert, you might, think that other people are similar to you, or people who come into a meeting and are comfortable kind of winging it and just, having a conversation on the fly, whereas other people like to have a little more time to process things in advance before they come into the meeting. And so just really being cognizant of that, and thinking of the small things you can do to help people feel more comfortable. For example, for those people who prefer to have a little bit of time to process ideas, send out an agenda in advance. Here's the topics we're going to talk about, or here's the materials. So they have an opportunity to review them and then come to the table, come to the meeting with their ideas and feel more confident and comfortable to share them. But I think finding ways to be deliberately and intentionally inclusive will help break down those barriers and silos, because everyone feels more safe and comfortable and confident and able to share their ideas. And that will inherently drive a lot more creativity and risk-taking in your organization, because people feel that sense of safety and connectedness. And the third one here, so as at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all do our best when we have a sense of connectedness to other people. And that looks different for each of us. But if you think about how we can turbocharge those relationships deliberately, it will also help you turbocharge your innovation. And what I mean by that is, if we can be very deliberate about connecting with others. So you want it to happen organically, of course, but we're not all in the same location, not in the same office, and so it doesn't happen organically, even pre-pandemic. And so being deliberate about thinking of ways to help your teams connect goes a long, long way to helping, again, foster that sense of safety and connectedness and open-mindedness for the teams. And so two ways that I found to do this that have been really effective is, one is this notion of different organizations have used different terms for it, but we call it like unpacking your suitcase, or me in a minute. And it's really simple to do. I've done it in all of my town hall meetings and all hands sessions, where I invite people in advance to put together just a single slide about themselves. And it's all visual, it's photos. So, and it only takes, 2 or 3 minutes to do. Pull your favorite photos from your phone, put them up on the slide like a collage. And then in the meeting, I'll invite them to just spend 3 to 5 minutes talking about themselves, using the photos as a vehicle for the conversation. So sharing information about your family, your hobbies, your places you've traveled to, what you like to do outside of work. And I have to tell you, that is the single sort of favorite item when I do, surveys or ask people like for feedback about the town halls. That's the thing that everybody says that they like. And it's totally unwork related, but it's personal, and it helps people get to know each other on a very different level than your typical, professional interactions that you have every day. And I would invite you to have everyone in your organization do this. Just rotate through, have your direct reports do it, have your interns do it, have everyone on your team do it. And even when you have guest speakers come to your meetings or your staff meetings, have them do it too. It doesn't take a lot of time, and we just rotate through and do maybe 2 or 3 in each meeting. And it's a really great way to get to know people on a very personal level. The second thing that I found works really well is to carve out time in your team meetings or your staff meetings to have people connect on a more personal level. So have the first half of your meeting still be your standard agenda, your business-oriented topics that you need to cover, but maybe once a month or on a regular basis, carve out the second half of that meeting to have people talk about movies, books, share stories, share things about what's going on in their life and their family. And we particularly now that we're all virtual, our work life clearly overflows for most of us into our personal lives. So why not reverse that a little bit and allow people to bring their personal lives into their work setting a little bit as well, and really give them an opportunity to connect on a personal level. And I think this, again, it goes a long way towards creating that sense of connectedness, so people feel more creative, more open, more willing to take risks, not only with the products you're building, but with each other. And so I think it's a huge, huge dividend for the investment that you make in inviting people to be deliberate about sharing. And so with that, I wanted to kind of just talk about some common questions and challenges that I often hear in various discussions that I've had with folks over the years. And so the most biggest topic is always around people management, right? So how do you handle people who are resistant to change? And you know who those people are, right? We've all encountered them, who sometimes they're loud, sometimes they're subtle, but they're digging in their heels sometimes, and detractors to the innovation and product changes that you're trying to drive. And what I found here is, if you can do it, one of the best tactics is to remain calm, right? When someone is very heated and worked up, if you can just remain calm, it kind of deflates their reactions to whatever you're sharing. But beyond that, always bring it back to the customer. Why are we doing this? And what's the value for the customer? That's very hard to argue with when you can bring it back to what the real value is at the end of the day. This isn't, it's not my baby. This isn't something personal. This is for the customer. And then on top of that, help people get comfortable with the change, because it is hard, right? And so how can you help them get comfortable in small steps? So for example, if people have anxiety about introducing something that is, a big change, are there ways that you can roll this out through a really small pilot or a test group or some kind of a beta phase to test it out, and then get data and customer testimonials and clear validation in terms of the impact that's having on your customers, and bring that back to your detractors. And that, again, it's hard to argue with what your customers are saying, what the data is saying in your feedback. And so I think those things really go a long way towards helping bring resistors along. The second thing I often hear about is balancing hiring between new people that you bring into your organization who may be very eager, enthusiastic, great new ideas and want to innovate, with existing teams who are, they've slogged through a lot and have a view of what it takes to, keep the lights on and keep everything running. And how do you balance that without creating frustration on both sides? And I think the best answer here that I found is, again, to bring it back to that shared common mission and vision, right? And so if you've established, here's what we're trying to do, here's our goal, get from X to Y by when, that your existing teams are aligned to, then when you bring in new people, it's not a juxtaposition between new and old, but rather you're bringing new ideas in to ultimately help you get from X to Y. So yeah, we welcome new ideas and enthusiasm. Bring it in to help us align to the objectives that we all have. And then the third piece here around what to look for when hiring for product innovation roles. I think this one is very subjective, but for me personally, I've found that I've had the best success when I don't focus on hard skills or, specific technologies or domain expertise or specific things that are actually teachable and learnable. And those skills can all be learned. The things that I've found are much harder to teach are the key skills that make a difference. Things like initiative. Are they someone who really is willing to take risks and drive things forward, particularly in the product and innovation space? We hear no a lot. We hear people say, that's not going to work. And so you need someone who has the resilience and the fortitude to be able to say, well, how can we solve for this and really find solutions? The other thing that I often look for is people who are not one-dimensional. So, all other things being equal, people, you have two product managers who have great skills, maybe both have domain expertise, but if one of them also has a deep interest or expertise in art or music or science or something else, I would always lean towards that person because they're going to bring a more multi-dimensional creative aspect to the role and think about things from different angles. And the third thing that I always look for is a sense of ownership and integrity, right? So someone that's going to own things from start to finish, which is inherent in the role of a product manager. You've got to, every day the buck stops with you, and you've got to be able to own and resolve issues from start to finish, and that's a real skill that not everyone has, but I think it's really key as you're hiring folks. The other big set of questions that I often hear about is, how do you maintain momentum? How do you prioritize when you have multiple different initiatives or different paths that you can go down? And I'm not going to talk about like all the tactics that you can use to prioritize. I know there's a wealth of information in this space, but if you're looking at option A versus option B, of course, you start with which one's going to give you the best ROI, the biggest impact on your customers. But beyond that, there's also an opportunity to look at the design of the solution and how can you use technology and design to help you kind of hedge your bets. So for example, are there common components between path A and path B? And if there are, can you build those out as microservices that are reusable modular components? So then even if you decide, okay, I'm going to go down path A, but maybe you get a little bit down that path and you decide, no, the market's changed, I actually want to change gears and go down path B, you've minimized your throwaway work because you've been very deliberate about the design up front in thinking through how you can maximize your different options there. Another question I get a lot is, how do you connect innovation to other parts of the organization? And this one, there's no real shortcut here. This is, you got to dig in and make the investment to reach out to other parts of the organization, share the work that you're doing, but also use it as an opportunity to learn about what's happening in the rest of the org. And I think that has a huge opportunity, not only for you to connect the dots between the innovation that you're developing and how it can be used in the rest of the organization, but also an opportunity for you as an individual as you look at your career development, because it will give you a different vantage point in the organization. You see a bigger picture when you're deliberately connecting with those other parts of the organization to understand how they work and how the things you're developing impact what they're doing as well. And then the last question here is really around maintaining enthusiasm and focus when you have large scale initiatives and things that take months or years to deliver. It's easy for people to kind of run out of steam and you don't have that same momentum you had in the beginning. And to this, I'd say, really three things. One is, again, come back to that shared bold vision that you've set, but find different ways to say it. so that it stays fresh, right? So maybe it's, instead of just slides, maybe it's a cartoon you develop, or maybe it's a video or a case study, or you bring in quotes from your actual customers. But find other ways to keep the vision fresh so it still stays in people's minds. The second thing here is really around celebrating your successes, no matter how small they might be. What are the bits of incremental progress, forward momentum that you can showcase and really rally around? And maybe that's, even through bringing in all your stakeholders into your sprint demos, or UIs or mock-ups, or different designs that you put together, but use that to really keep the momentum going and keep people interested in the work that's underway. And then the third piece here is really bring it back to, why are we doing this? And go directly to your customers or to your customer support teams and listen in on the calls. Like, find actual verbatim interactions with customers where they are lamenting about the problems they have that you're working on a solution to, or things where they say, I really wish that this product did XYZ. And bring that back to your teams, because then it can be very reinvigorating to remind yourself, hey, here's a specific customer, this is their name, here's how they're using our product, and here's what they wish it would do. That's what we're building, and that's why this is important. But really just bring it back full circle, so people, you kind of keep that engagement and that momentum. So kind of wrapping it up a little bit, why this matters now, I think particularly more than ever, is really because there's a natural tipping point, and we've all seen this, right? When enough people begin to adopt new innovation, it becomes very hard for incumbents to then break through. And if you haven't developed a culture of speed and a place where people feel comfortable being creative and taking risks and blurring those lines between the teams, it becomes very hard to catch up. And on top of that, particularly now with the pandemic, we've seen the speed of customer adoption of new technologies really increasing. And I think it's just been accelerated, probably 5-10 years ahead of where we might have been otherwise. And so that notion of customer adoption, the expectations that customers have now because of the experiences they've had as a result of doing so many more things digitally, really translates to the expectations that they have with our products, even if they're in a completely different space. And so there's an opportunity here for us as product managers to really capitalize on where we sit, the vantage point that we have across all of the different components that go into building a successful product, and finding ways to break down those barriers and really reduce the friction in each of those steps. So let me leave it there and open it up for questions. And really, I know we have a good sized group today, so I would love to hear from all of you. There's best practices, experiences you've had, things that you'd like to share with the group, and any questions that may have come in over the chat as well. So let me start my share here. Mm-hmm.
This has been interesting. You've thrown out so many thoughts. I think people are still kind of swimming in them. One of the questions that came to me, and I'll apologize for the cat in the hallway. You were talking about trying to find multidimensional people, and I find that that's almost counter to most of the recruiting and HR processes. That I've had somebody in the past say, well, how can you be an expert on two things? We're trying to hire an expert just in this one narrow thing. And it's confusing when you're also an expert in these other seemingly unrelated things. How do you kind of get your HR filters tuned, whether the filter is a system or a person, to be able to find that multi-skilled person?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think from a system perspective, putting all those keywords into your, your job description and really being open about the fact that we are looking for people who are not one-dimensional, who can bring a level of, creativity and thought leadership to the role, not just to be focused on this one thing that we're asking for. And then the other way, like, not systematically, but in the interviews, right? Really asking the question, what do you like to do outside of work? What else do you do? Where else do you have expertise? And really just kind of making that part of the conversation and inviting people to share, what makes them a whole human versus just, their expertise in a single domain. Yeah.
Excellent. So if anybody has a question they'd like to ask in person, you can raise your hand or unmute. And we've got...
There's a question that came in from Lauren. What advice would you give to a risk-averse individual who's thrown into an innovation product role?
That's a good question. That's hard, right? You're asking someone to sort of move outside of their comfort zone, and really embrace change and flexibility and an environment where things are very dynamic and probably not as structured as they might like. The advice I would have is, as much as you can, as much as your own personality will allow you, embrace it, and again, recognize it doesn't have to be perfect. And sometimes that's what holds us back, right? We think that we have to do everything exactly right and we want it to be perfect. But if you allow yourself that space to say, it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay, I think that can help open up the mindset to allow people to be a little bit more comfortable in that environment. I think the other thing is, sometimes we can get more comfortable with things when we try to teach them or do them ourselves, right? So in the same way that you would want someone else to invite you and invite everyone to have a seat at the table, I would suggest someone that's risk adverse, try doing the things that are hard for you with everyone else, right? Think about how you can include others, or how you can help other people who might be risk adverse have a seat at that table and be really comfortable sharing their thoughts and ideas. And I'd say the third thing is, like, nothing's permanent, right? Everything can change. Everything is, it was a good way someone phrased it, like, no decision is really final, right? So give yourself that space to know that you can always come back and you can change your mind, and it'll be okay.
I've found some folks struggle a little bit. You had mentioned kind of bringing in legal and some of the other groups early on. And I've found that useful, that you don't have to, you build this product and say, well, you actually have to change it all before you launch it because it's not whatever requirements, because they weren't included in the stakeholder meetings originally. And then I've also seen engineers refer to said departments as the Department of No. Like, you're not inviting those folks. So do you have any tips for folks that are kind of navigating that cultural divide between the engineers who just want to build something quickly and the folks that really want to make sure that what they're building the first time is actually not going to have to be reworked after the fact?
Yeah, well, what's worse, like having someone at the table from the beginning and maybe they say no, and maybe you make a small course correction, versus having built your whole thing and then have them come in and say no, and now you got to rework like a lot more stuff. That may be one way to phrase it, like, have legal is going to be legal in that example, right? And they're going to bring a valuable and important perspective to protect the organization. That's not going to go away. The question is, do you want them on your side as a partner, helping you solve problems from the beginning, or do you want to kind of keep them at arm's length and then you got to sort of fight them at the end, which is just going to be painful for everybody. So Yeah, I think bringing them in early and often, and also discussing with them, like, what's their role? Why are you bringing them in? And you're bringing them in because you value their opinion and you want them to have a seat at the table. Changes their perspective as well, as in, oh, people hate it when I come here and I have to put up these roadblocks, to, okay, I'm going to help you find a legal solution to this problem that you're trying to navigate. I had a number of examples where that's exactly what they did. Legal was able to help us find a very creative alternative to something that we were trying to solve for. So we didn't have to build functionality to solve it. We were able to take a different route to still getting to the same place.
I think some engineers sell legal short by not realizing that it is a creative profession quite frequently.
Right, exactly.
Tom, you got Ron?
Ron has a hand up.
Yeah, Ron, you want to unmute and feel free to chime in?
Yeah. So, Jasmine, you brought up agile and mindset on the same slide. And I've got sort of two questions, because there are two challenges around agile and mindset on the same slide and in the same idea. One of them is I see a ton of agile theater out there, which is mindset lacking, actually, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on bringing agile mindset, replacing agile theater with agile mindset, and how we go about, and how you've had success going about that. And then secondly, you were talking about mindset shift across the whole ecosystem. And that's a complaint that the product teams often have is, well, the rest of the organization's not agile. You know, even if we're agile, even if we've got a mindset of it, the rest of the organization's not agile. It's a real struggle in that way. So both mindset instead of agile theater in our team, and then extending the mindset.
Yeah, so I would say from the mindset perspective, again, I think really you're asking people to change the way they think about things, particularly when they're not with you every day with your sprint teams. It's hard for sales or marketing to understand, why can't you give me a firm date for when you're going to have this functionality? And, I want to see it all. They're like, where's my contract of exactly what I can expect and when I can expect it? And so we're asking a lot. We're asking them to also change their approach. And I think that's something that we often don't make the investment in when we say we're going agile. We just think of it in this technology construct. And so if we can, again, bring those partners to the table in the beginning and explain to them, here's how we're doing stuff. Here's how we're evaluating what's going into each sprint. Here's how we're prioritizing the work, and we want your input. And I know, everyone's got a day job. They don't have a ton of time, but there are effective ways you can do this. One of the ways we did it was to stand up essentially a product cabinet, which was comprised of our key stakeholders, and we would meet with them every 2 weeks and share, we'd share the sprint demos, we'd share, here's what's going into the sprint, but we would also share, here's key decision points, and here's things that we need to work through that we need your input on. So it was a discussion, and it was really a working level session, as opposed to just slideware and we're giving you the status update of, what the progress is. But I think that really helped shift the mindset of the whole ecosystem for people to feel like they were a part of the process, not outside of the process, and I think that's part of the gap sometimes, is where people are in the Agile club or they're outside of it. And then you don't have that same evolution. Does that answer your question?
So the flip side to not enough involvement, or not giving us their opinion, is, this is what I want, and I want you to interrupt the sprint and work on this now, because this is so important. I'm sure you've never heard that one.
Oh, that never happens, right? Yeah. Well, this is so important, then something else, is less important, right? That's the role of the product owner. There's a trade-off. It's a fixed capacity that they have to evaluate. And, can you bring it back to, why is this more important? How does this help us get from X to Y by that date? And if you can show, hey, well, this is going to get us 10 times more customers than the thing that we were doing before. Okay, now, now I'm listening. It's a little bit easier to get people to buy into that change when you can tie it back to the value that's going to have.
What I'd like is to start their most important thing in the next sprint and not have the incredible cost to engineering of interrupting the sprint.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, good question. Any other thoughts? Has anyone else experienced that or things to share?
We had, you did make a comment that was interesting about bringing in outside customer perspectives, and I found that to be useful. Not only just, you would think, oh, this is for the junior engineers to understand the impact of what they're building and what it's doing in the real world, but I found that even useful at the CTO level, where I had a conversation. They say, well, I think we're going to kill off this feature on the roadmap because it doesn't seem like anybody's using it. It was a generalized impression. And having spent the bulk of my time in that particular role in front of customers full time, I was able to sort of raise my hand and say, well, no one's using it because you built the client, but there's no server that supports this. And the big light bulb went off and said, I knew there was a reason why this was important, but I was able to bring to him 3 customer use cases from customers I was in front of regularly. And so people, most of the engineers that are building things, they don't get enough exposure to actual kind of customers and how they think and the pain points they're dealing with. And a little bit of that mixed in at the right time to the right person can have a huge outsized impact on product direction.
Yeah, completely agree. And even if you're building something that supports both customers, but also supports the operational processes you have, you can invite your engineers to sit down with your operations teams, and look at how are they doing what they're doing. How does this impact the rest of the organization? And just, sit right next to them, job shadow them, and watch what they're doing. We did that, and I completely agree with you, Tom. It's so valuable for your engineering teams to be able to listen in. You do a call splitter, right? And they can listen in directly to customer feedback that's coming in from customers, or looking over, an underwriter's shoulder to see how are they actually evaluating, the work that they're doing, or whatever the role might be. But yeah, completely agree.
Do you have a process for identifying, you mentioned legal as one of the stakeholders that frequently gets left out. Do you have a process for identifying, other groups that might be brought in early? I'm thinking of one case where suddenly somebody had the bright idea of bringing in tech support. And it was an eye opener. They realized that, they were talking to sales and marketing who said their product was perfect and there was never any issues with it. And then, suddenly the tech support people said, well, let me explain where all the holes are. And no one had ever thought to invite them before. And so do you have a process you go through to discover stakeholders and bring them out of the woodwork?
Well, I think you can look at the customer journey of your product, right? Like, where did they start and what are all the touch points that they are engaging with? And I think that way you see it from start to finish. Like, what's not just the front end, what's the proactive marketing, but then when they call in, and also look at cross channel, right? So, are they interacting mobile or in person or on your website? And are they switching between those? And if they're switching, why are they switching? Is it that your app keeps dropping them, or, what's happening all the way through every single touch point that they would have with your product? I think that will give you that kind of comprehensive end-to-end view. And don't, we try not to just stop with, okay, we've launched this product, to your point, not only tech support, but tech support long-term, right? So for your long-standing customers, when are they coming back? So you can get a sense of, hey, is my product typically failing after the 12-month mark or after the, 5-year mark? Like what's the long time, stability of the product as well?
We've seen that with a few of the customer success where they've built in metrics and they can tell that, well, the reason why we got no feedback from the customers is we rolled out this feature and there was 2 users who kicked the tires and they never logged into that feature after that. So that's kind of interesting as we instrument everything and collect usage data that we never had access to before. Besides the cat at my feet, anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask? We've got definitely a few more minutes here. If you've got any interesting anecdotes that tie into this, feel free to unmute.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask Ron, is he really seeing people who are pushing interruptions of active sprints? And if so, are those long sprints or what?
Well, 2 weeks sprints is far and away, far and away the majority of sprints are 2-week sprints. But startup CEOs have a tendency to ideate at a rate that's several orders of magnitude faster than developers can develop.
Keyword startup, got it.
And their last idea is always the smartest one.
So I'm wondering where the Scrum Masters are in educating these people as to the costs of their bright, shiny object behavior.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
Peter, were you chipping in there?
Yeah, it sounds like shiny object syndrome, and I've definitely dealt with a lot of that. And yes, young startup CEOs are often very, enamored with their latest idea, and have to be told to wait a little while, and it's a hard conversation to have. Totally get it.
Older startup CEOs too, who don't have experience with technology and don't realize the cost of interrupting sprints.
Yeah.
Have you found a way to quantify that cost?
Yeah, it's more anecdotal. When you ask. So there is
actually there are ways to quantify it.
Go for it, Peter.
Yeah, so it actually is something you can usually quantify by loss of velocity in your sprints. Yeah. So the sprints that don't get interrupted usually have better velocity. Versus sprints that do get interrupted. So you can do like, hey, well, this sprint where you interrupted us and we threw everything away that we were done doing, and then when we tried to pick it back up, it took us several days to actually pick it back up. So there's both the anecdotal side of it that kind of you can rationally explain to people why this happens, and then there's also if you're doing good tracking on your sprints, then you should have some kind of velocity history, and you should be able to show that, look, my velocity just went to shit because you interrupted my process.
Beyond the easy metrics like that, what is the cost if you lose a developer because they're pissed off because you've just frustrated them by doing that? How much is it going to cost you to replace that developer? Just one developer. Yeah. And it starts to come into focus real fast then.
Yeah, depends if they're your 10x developer or not as well.
True.
Because there are developers that are worth 10x more than others.
So there's another question from Harry that says, what is your best practice to decide priority across many product innovation works or features?
So best practice, I would say, and there's a ton of tools that I know are out there that people use, and everyone has a kind of favorite tool, but I would say the best practice is really break it down to what are the dimensions that are most important to you and to your organization as you evaluate your choices, right? Is it growth? Is it operational? savings? Is it efficiency? You know, what are the biggest dimensions? And then evaluate that functionality based on those core dimensions. And those are going to be specific to your organization and where it is in its life cycle and what you're trying to achieve. You know, are you a startup trying to, you know, establish market share? Are you a larger organization trying to really drive more efficiency? Are you in a precarious spot and you really need to focus on cost savings? You know, but what are those different dimensions based on where your organization is at? And, you know, write them down, make it really, really structured. So then it's an unbiased approach to evaluating different functionalities. Anyone else have best practices in that area?
Okay.
I'd say it's definitely a multi-factor. You know, there's so many factors that go into juggling that, but it's a if it makes people feel any better, it's one of the most common issues that we struggle with as product managers, and especially in an innovation space. You know, I've got a number of artificial intelligence things, and everybody's got this AI idea. But you know, if you start saying, well, how many data scientists and how many AI experts do I need to corral together to start in on this project? You very quickly realize that, you know, well, we can only really do maybe 3 of these in a year at most in a full investigation. So then you have to figure out what's your filtering criteria from there. And you know, Jasmine, to your point, it comes down to what's going to make the most in terms of the metrics that you have with customers or organizational goals.
So I think to the prioritization that you threw out there, Jasmine, when I worked at Apple, which is a while ago, a couple of decades ago, after Steve had left and before Steve came back, there was a really smart project manager there who shared a rule of thumb with me that if everything is a priority, nothing's a priority. And at Apple at that time, everything was a priority, which meant that nothing was a priority. That period in between, after Steve left and after Jean-Louis Gasset left, Scully and the crew after that just said yes to everything. And I think it's really frustrating for a product organization to try to prioritize in the context of, oh, everything's important. And we really have to understand whether we're focused on revenue or on profits or on new customers or on customer retention or and you listed several that I didn't have on my list, Jasmine. So thank you. What's important to us?
Yeah, and if you can't articulate what's important to you, then how can you achieve it, right? Like it's one of those things that we'll figure it out later. No, that's the most important thing that is worth figuring out. Everything else should key off of that. Yeah.
A priority list that reads horizontally is not very helpful.
Yes.
Not everything can be priority 1.
Exactly.
We need a prioritized backlog.
Even fire departments triage.
Yep.
I had to tell people that several times. Oh,
With good reason. Resources are finite.
exactly.
One question about customers, Jasmine. One of the ways to be deliberate about sharing and to be deliberate about mission and vision is to get people in front of customers. It's nothing like getting developers in front of customers to realize that it doesn't work, or it breaks in somewhere I didn't expect. Do you get and so my question is, do you drag legal in front of customers and those other parts of the organization as well? Because we know it's best practice to get everybody in the product team to do this.
Yeah, we have not as extensively as, it's sort of small steps, right? Like let's first focus on getting all of our engineers in front of customers, or, listening to calls through the call splitters. And then we did do it with a couple of folks, and it was very valuable, but I think it was most valuable when we had our engineers actually listening, side by side, watching how customers were using products. But I think that should absolutely be part of the evolution, right? Like, just like you have agile maturity, maybe this is part of the overall maturity of your ecosystem. Has everyone had a chance to sit down with the customer and really get that experience as well? Yeah, it's a good point.
So to that point, Jasmine, there is a reluctance in certain organizations to get engineers in front of customers because then there are issues like if a customer says, how long will it take you to add this new wonderful feature that I want? And the engineer says 2 weeks. And the customer thinks that they'll actually get that feature in 2 weeks, which is not true. It could be 3 months because of all the overhead that's involved in getting something out the door. So I've seen in my experience, there's a reluctance to get engineers in front of customers unless it's in a meeting where they are mainly listeners rather than participants.
Yeah, so I've seen that addressed in 2 ways. One, exactly like you said, they're listeners instead of participants. Or if it's like a call center, you can have them, listen to calls, and there's, no interaction there. The other thing is, you kind of coach them before you go into that interaction to say, don't give out any dates, like here's sort of the rules of engagement in the, we're here to listen, we're here to learn. We can't make, we're not here to make any commitments because we still need to prioritize. The customer might say, hey, can you do this? But they might be, a population of one, right? Like, you still need to vet it amongst all of your other customers and make sure that it's the right priority for the product, not just for that one customer. So I think just a little bit of coaching and guidance can go a long way there.
Okay.
I wonder if, and this will have to be pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, but if your organizations have one-way Debashish and Jasmine, if you've got one-way glass kinds of user experience testing rooms for people to try out stuff, because that's one of the places that I like. Mm-hmm. Engineers they can't hear any engineers, but engineers can sure watch them stumble over using over the UX of what they've designed.
Yeah, we've done that. And with the one-way glass, it's so funny when engineers will be behind the glass, like almost yelling at the customer, no, it's this button, why aren't you pressing that? Yeah. So yeah, it's a lot, it's almost more telling when they're not directly, nudging the person to do what they expected them to do. So
I've also seen, just to save money on glass, because I've done the glass thing before, but we were able to wire up a secondary tap, essentially, of the monitor that the person was running the software on. So there was a second room that had the monitor and it had a camera of what was going on in the room, and we could get the whole engineering team to watch that. And again, they were yelling, no, it's the blue button. Yeah, it's a dose of reality, but it's really helpful to see kind of what the perceptions are, and the thing that it starts to underline to some extent. If you're building a global product, you can find that the team was North America based or they're European based, and you suddenly start testing it with users in Asia where user interfaces are built entirely differently due to languages reading, up and down instead of left and right. You start to be able to identify cultural assumptions that you've made, and you think, well, everyone will get this, and it's shocking, like where that comes out, and you realize that you don't know what you didn't know.
There's another question from Harry, who says, how do you cultivate the sense to feel, oh, this problem is worth to solve? What type of data, quantitative or qualitative, will make you feel such a way typically? Is
So I
that-
think it comes, oh, go ahead.
is the question clear, or
Yeah, I think it really relates to the, to prioritization again, right? So how do you evaluate opportunities that you have? We all have like backlogs way too long. There's always a ton of things that we want to do, but really being very deliberate about what you say no to is just as important as what you say yes to. So I think really identifying your criteria, how are you going to evaluate what you say yes to, and being really deliberate about that.
Well, I think we've gone through, there's a fantastic set of questions. I'm really impressed with everyone chiming in. Did anybody have some lingering question that they are waiting until the end to have us finish off with something brilliant? Here, yeah, this is Jim was chiming in that what you say, oftentimes what you say no to can be even more important than what you say yes to. So with that, I think we've kind of run through most of the questions. Just a few wrapping up notes. This session is recorded, and so if you have coworkers that you get into the quote unquote virtual office tomorrow, and when they say, "Well, what did you do last night?" I attended this fabulous presentation. I wish you were there. You can forward them the link, and we will have the recording of this presentation online, both on the SVPMA website as well as the SVPMA YouTube channel. And so that would be that'll be available. And if you ever need to refer back to it, a year from now, you are suddenly put in charge of a major innovation effort, and you need to refer back. We do have the archives available, so this is available for anyone to reference. Let's see, what else have we got? So don't forget the upcoming events. Product Camp is Friday and Saturday on the virtual side, and there was the link in the chat window. If any of you have any suggested topics for the future, feel free to reach out to any of the board members. And with that, just if this was particularly useful to you and interesting, please let us know. And with that, I'd like to thank Jasmine for her presentation. This was excellent, and also to the audience who had such great questions and follow up. I think the discussion afterwards was equally enlightening. So that was quite good. Did you have any closing remarks you'd like to?
No, I just want to say thank you. It was great to come back and and be a part of the SVPMA again. And everyone, we're all doing terrific work. I think it's just really awesome to see the evolution of the organization. So thank you all, and thank you for everything that you're doing as product managers in evolving the profession every day. It's a hard job. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks very much. And like I say, stay tuned for the recording. We'll send you a link when that gets posted. And
Tom, there was a request to post the Product Camp RTP link on the chat.
If you scroll back in the chat, it was posted.
If you arrived later, it's not there.
Okay. So
it's a Zoom feature.
Yeah, sounds like
the number one deficiency in Zoom, as far as I can see. Should have been at least number 2 or 3 on top of some backlog, and instead you get pig ears.
They're not talking to customers. So if you go to productcamprtp.org, and I will paste this into the chat window just now. I'll do this one more time.
So North Carolina's.
So North Carolina was the initiating Product Camp that is doing the hosting. So feel free to check on that if you have some time Friday and on Saturday, and you'll see a lot of familiar faces there. So with that, now that we've finished off the last question, thanks everyone for coming, and thank you very much to Jasmine. And we'll see you again, if not at Product Camp on the weekend, we will see you next month, which will be probably the second week of July because of the July 4th holiday. So stay tuned and we'll see you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.